Should you condition your knuckles if you do martial arts? This is a tricky subject. I think you have to do some minimum amount of conditioning for your knuckles, but how much do you want to do? That's a real question because you're balancing off two different things. Let's talk about risk versus reward in knuckle conditioning. We'll start with a reward first. The reward is having really strong knuckles and a powerful fist that you can deliver a really hard shot to a harder part of the body. The jaw is a harder part of the body, the temple is a harder part of the body, or even a super hard part of the body, like the head, like the forehead, and not break your knuckles, not dislocate your wrist, and hopefully knock the guy out, which isn't without its own dangers to you legally, but for the sake of argument, let's say you knock the guy out and the guy falls on grass and doesn't give himself a concussion and die. That's the reward, having a reliable weapon. Even as primarily a grappler, I totally appreciate that there are times when the fastest thing you can do is deliver, say, a left hook to the jaw, or a punch to the neck, or a punch to the temple, knock the guy out, stop the fight right there. What's the risk? The risk is damage in the short term, but much more worrying is damage in the long term. We're talking about arthritis. We're talking about the inability to sign your name when you're 50 years old. We're talking about your hands hurting every day for the second half of your life. And I speak from a little bit of experience here. As you can see here, I used to do a lot of knuckle conditioning. You see how much higher that knuckle is? It's been broken a couple of times. When I was young, I read accounts of karate guys punching the makiwara again and again and again until they had like calluses on their knuckles. I grew up with accounts of Kajukenbo guys specifically taking, like whiskey, cigarette ashes, and a spoon and pounding that into the knuckles to build up the skin till they had sort of fake calluses on there. I grew up with accounts of Chinese martial artists going up to a boulder, this is all fake, punching the boulder till their knuckles broke, then letting it heal, and then going back to the same boulder, punching it again till the knuckles broke again, letting it heal, punching it again, and basically over time breaking and re-breaking the knuckles till they had two massive clubs of bone instead of hands. That sounded pretty cool to 12-year-old Stefan. It sounded pretty cool to 12-year-old Stefan, who was pretty sure he might have to be a wandering monk in medieval China, ready to defend himself with his fists against sword-armed bandits at any time, because I'd seen way too many kung fu movies. But you know what? Now that I'm not 12-year-old Stefan, I'm probably as mature as 12-year-old Stefan, but I'm a little bit smarter, a little bit more experienced, I realize that there's utility in being able to type, in being able to shave, and being able to sign my name. So I'm much less gung-ho on knuckle conditioning now than I used to be, especially when there are alternatives. Focusing mostly on your clinching skills, your elbows, and your knees, because those don't need as much conditioning as your fists. But I still think that if you're interested in the self-defense aspect of martial arts, and you should be, that you have to take into account that you are sometimes going to punch people, and you might punch them in harder parts of the body. It's just such an effective tool, a longer range tool. It's instinctive. People teach empty-handed strikes. It takes a ton of effort to overwhelm, to reprogram yourself from making a fist and punching it to taking your open hand and hitting. Bas Rutten managed to do it because he was constrained by the rules of Pancrase. Pancrase said no open-handed hitting, so he decided to club people here with this. That will work. But you know what? If Bas Rutten got in a street fight, I bet he would punch, because that's just so instinctive. Plus you get a little bit more range, plus you can deliver shots a little bit harder, at the risk of breaking your knuckles. So in terms of balancing risk and reward, what's a relatively low risk, high reward approach to knuckle and wrist conditioning? Number one, you should occasionally punch the bag, punch the focus mitts, punch other objects with your bare hands. You don't want to do a whole ton of it if you're concerned about arthritis in the hands. You don't want to, but you should do it occasionally. If nothing else, this will teach you how to keep your wrist aligned. It's so common when people get used to hand wraps to punch like this, or they're punching with open hands because with a great big boxing glove there, it's a bit faster to have that hand open. And it's not instinctive to make a really tight fist. A friend of mine who trained with a founder of Kyokoshin was taught this way to make a fist. You take your hand, you close the first row of knuckles as hard as you can. Then you close the next row of knuckles as hard as you can. Then you take the fist or the thumb, and close the fist as hard as you can, and you squeeze as hard as you can. That's a fist. That's not as, loose as most kickboxing guys like to have it, but Kyokushin is a bare knuckle art. They're not punching for the head, but they could hit an elbow, so they want this to be a solid block of wood. And they train that by going here. In fact, you should see little calluses or little indents here if you've been doing that a long time. So that's number one. If you're thinking about bare knuckle, really clench your fist, really tighten your forearm, really keep your wrist lined up. It should be a straight line here, and these should be like a block of wood from here to here. Number two, knuckle push-ups. Not wanting to be accused of being a pussy, brought in a cinder block here. Knuckle push-ups, either on these two knuckles or on these three knuckles. And actually it's not either, it's both. Because even if you're punching with these two knuckles the way that I was taught, you're occasionally gonna miss and you're gonna hit with those knuckles, right? The guy moves his head a little bit. Instead of clipping him with the big two knuckles, you're gonna clip him with the smaller boxing knuckles, and you want those to be tight. You want those to be conditioned. So you're gonna do knuckle push-ups, two types, here and here. This is the first type. There. I am here. If you zoom in, you can see that I'm on these two knuckles here. That's going to be the first set. The second set is going to be here on these three knuckles there. I'm doing them both. Typically, you're going to be doing it like you're punching. So you're either going to have the fist vertical or turned here, there. Or alternately, I'll turn them here so you can see. There, there. That was a dirty cinder block from the garden, but it serves a purpose because you can see that the knuckles and to some extent these fingers here made contact, which is realistic because if you're punching me in the head here, I might move a bit and then you're gonna be clipping me with these fingers. Or I might move a bit here and be clipping me with the smaller fingers. So make your fists and your forearms blocks of wood. Number one. Number two, occasionally punch the heavy bag, punch the focus mitts, punch other targets with your bare hands. Number three, do knuckle push-ups. Then there's a whole bunch of fancy knuckle conditioning that you can do. But my personal feeling is that in general, for the public, unless you're making your life bare knuckle fighting in Kyokushin or bare knuckle fighting in Lethwei or defending Chinese caravans from bandits with your fists, I don't think the reward is worth the risk. I like being able to sign my name, and I like being able to, grip the neck. I like being able to open and close my hands into my old age. So that's the trade-off that I'm willing to do. And I think for most people, that's the correct trade-off.